Nothing just to say, but to thank Matt for being here today. A really good opportunity to present at board as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Barry. And you're staying, Barry, for another item? Yeah, okay. Bridget, anything?
Yeah, no, it's not 100%.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Matt.
Bye.
Okay. Can we just record for the minutes that the recording was asked to be stopped at the request of Jodie's family, just so that we have it on record? Okay.
Yes, Mike.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on then to the next item, which is the chair's report. We're asked to note the contents, usual presentation. Happy to answer any questions. No, thank you, colleagues. That saves us time. And we'll move on 137, Chief Exec report. Aaron, update report from you, please.
Thanks, Chairman. So unusually this morning, Chair, there's quite a lot in my Chief Exec's report that's picked up either under IPR or other items like the partnership updates or the Q2 review. So I'll keep it brief this morning. So I'll start off as I tend to do with the Chief Exec's update over the last 2 years at least or more, a recognition and a thanks to all colleagues in the Trust and in our wider partnership in Bay Health and Care Partners for their continued efforts and support, particularly in managing urgent care pathways and the discharges that we have to support day in, day out now between our community teams, primary care, mental health. So very similar to the feedback Matt's just given on recognising the role of the partners play in the work that we do. It's important for me that I recognise that at each board meeting because we are still operating under continued pressure. And I'm just very proud and pleased when I see and hear the way that our teams and partners interact with each other in dealing with some of those pressures. Having said that, the national update, it would be remiss of me not to recognise, not from a political perspective, only to reference that politically it is difficult at the moment with changes of leadership, new Secretary of State, etc. So there's been very strong messages from the NHS national leadership about where our focus is currently. That's around winter preparations and our deployment of winter plans and capacity plans. We'll hear a bit more about that as a board today, but lots of regional and national workshops to share good practice and make sure that colleagues are taking forward all reasonable plans that we can at that point. And then not a surprise, but starting a real focus again on the financial position of the NHS. Colleagues will understand why in terms of the deficits that a lot of providers have at the moment, ours included, and the wider economic position that the country finds itself in. We're likely to face further significant financial challenge. So the work that Chris leads with our organisation and colleagues around the Strategic Financial Improvement Plan, we will need to bring that closer to the board, I think, over the coming months and making sure that we're really clear on the actions we need to be taking to address that particular challenge as we move through winter and into next year. One other issue to pick up from a national perspective is the report by Sir Bill Kirkup into maternity services at East Kent. I would encourage all colleagues, if not already, to read that report in full. It's a timely reminder, again, of what happens when we as providers of healthcare don't get things right. And it's incumbent on us all to reflect on our own contributions, our own portfolios and the board work, that any reflections of action taken as a result of Sir Bill's report into East Kent maternity services, we have a view around the work we're doing with the National Maternity Support Programme to make sure we have those included in our own improvement work. We'll hear quite a bit around maternity safety and maternity delivery on the board agenda today, Chair, which is part of the board's increased oversight in that particular service. From a regional perspective, we've given lots of updates previously on changes to structures and leadership roles, which you'll find contained in the report for reference. From our perspective, we've now started to engage with the new place-based directors, Jane Scattergood and Louise Taylor, to start to work through what it means for Bay Health and Care Partners delivery over the next 6, 12, 18 months as those structures embed. We've also had 2 more formal structured meetings in the last couple of weeks. An integrated care board to board meeting with our own board of directors that happened last week for a couple of hours to talk about our key areas of improvement and progress to date and the key challenges we face, and some reflections from the ICB about where their priorities sit. It was a really positive, engaging meeting with the board for the first time, so that's encouraging. We're going to talk about how regularly we meet in the future and how that'll dovetail into our board reports in the future, but that's a quick verbal update. We also had a workshop last week with the Provider Collaborative Board, which you chair yourself, Chair, to talk about our future and our commitments to each other and what good looks like for that provider collaborative. Really good, engaging, challenging session with partners again. We'll be taking forward some work in Q3 and bring back to board any outputs from that in terms of changes to how we work with that collaborative. But one of the actions we took was there will now be a standard provider collaborative report produced. You'll see a bit more detail in today's board, but a standard report that will go to all provider collaborative board meetings in the future, so we're consistent in the feedback and the messaging we give from a system perspective. At a trust level, increased priority focus in a couple of areas. One around making sure that colleague health and wellbeing remains one of our top priorities. I'll say a bit more about that in our Q2 review, particularly with the expansion now of our COVID booster and flu vaccination programmes, which I know Bev will say a bit more about later, and the enhanced occupational health offer that we've got as we head through to winter. Real purposeful focus on the recovery support programme, which Chris will say a bit more later, particularly on the exit criteria, evidence to support we are delivering or planning to deliver against those criteria. And more importantly, Chair, the narrative we start to build around the so what. You know, you'll start to see that play more and more into assurance committee meetings and board meetings about the impact of having delivered against those improvement trajectories that we put forward. Two areas of operational business that we'll focus on: winter resilience, winter preparation, and urgent care. Again, we'll have an update from Scott later on the agenda. And one area to highlight, Chair, is our elective recovery trajectory delivery up to this point has been very, very good. Compares incredibly well both within our ICS and the North West region. And to flag a risk that our capacity to deliver against that elective recovery trajectory has been impacted through October. Colleagues will be aware of the BMA issuing some guidance to its members around what's known as a rate card, the value that we pay for additional activity sessions or waiting list initiatives they used to be called. Some colleagues are signalling for a variety of reasons that to continue to deliver extra capacity on a work-life balance and the pressure in the system, we're seeing a reduced number of colleagues put their hands up to come and do that work. So we're just working with our JLNC and clinical leadership and the system about what that means more broadly, because we're not on our own. That's a feature that's happening in other trusts. So just to raise and flag that, Chair, today with the board. And very quickly, two housekeeping notices. We completed the recruitment process for our Chief People Officer the week before last. I'm delighted that we have offered the position to a fantastic candidate. Obviously, there are checks and balances, references and such contracts to secure, so I can't yet announce that to the board, but colleagues will be aware who've been engaged with the process who it is that we've appointed, and by the next board cycle we'll be able to make that announcement and introduce the new colleague to the board. And we've also had join us this month Helen Cobb as our Director of Finance. Helen joins us from the Manchester system, already having a great impact in the first few weeks with colleagues, and kind of you can see and hear Helen's contribution clearly already, which is fab. We haven't got rid of Chris. Chris is still the Chief Financial Officer. If colleagues are confused, so hang on, there's a Director of Finance. That's a change to the model of delivery of leadership that Chris has put forward for finance. It allows Chris to play the Chief Financial Officer role around financial strategy, financial governance, system financial delivery, and the Deputy Chief Executive role. So it's strengthened our senior leadership in finance, which is needed given the challenges that we face. And then the last update, Chair, Board will be aware we are reaching the final stages and conclusion of 2 of our clinical service review pieces of work with trauma and orthopaedics. We have the final reports due to board in November. We're then going to set up, very similar to what we did with urology, a session with the board and governors to go right back from when concerns were raised to current date, just to walk through all of the actions we've taken, the process we've followed, any changes to our governance or processes that have resulted as a kind of consequence of our learning in that space, so we can then sign off from trauma and orthopaedics perspective into business as usual. So that's an important staging post for us. Again, on record, thanks to the 2 consultants, Sham Kumar, Simon Ratcliffe, for their continued support, engagement in raising the issues and working with us to kind of get to a position where we can sign off that we've addressed what we've needed to in the right way. And we currently have Niche Consulting with us, who are the company that were commissioned by NHS England to help us with the urology review. They're now doing their final, what we call a phase 5 report, which is 1 year after the final actions being taken. They're now with us to do some further due diligence and audit work to ensure the actions we took were sustained and have delivered what's expected, and we'd expect a report back to the board in the new year. So in 5 minutes, Chair, that's a brief summary of the issues highlighted in my Chief Exec's report.
Thanks, Aaron. As you say, some of the most substantive elements will be later on in our agenda, but I'll open the floor. Any questions to the Chief Exec on his report? Adrian?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted, firstly, just to recognise the positive meeting with the ICB. It was extremely positive, and it did feel good, and I think signals the close working relationships going forward. So just congratulations to the leadership team. My question to Aaron was really about the potential action from nurses and junior doctors, and what impact that may or may not have on us, just regards winter pressures and our ability to actually deliver soft 4, and just whether Aaron had a view on this in terms of the impact and any mitigations that we've got at a trust level. Thank you.
Thanks, Adrian. So it is a concern. There are a number of professional bodies that have balloted or balloting their members on potential industrial action. We don't yet have a view of impact in terms of numbers and consequence, but we are working with union staff side and operational clinical colleagues to start to prep for, if there is any action, what kind of steps would we take to mitigate particularly urgent care access. Traditionally, when there's industrial action, it excludes those areas like critical care and A&E, so we can maintain those pathways. I would envisage that's the same in these circumstances. The impact for us will be colleague health and well-being, again, the stress and pressure that kind of action can bring, and there's lots of work you'll be aware of, Adrian, with the people committee that we're putting in place to support colleagues, and our elective recovery plans and winter resilience. We have as many mitigations as we can put in place currently to ensure safe delivery of services at this point. But it is really clear that if it does have a significant impact, we're going to have to come back to the board once that's a bit clearer with any additional mitigations or risk escalation at that point. So I appreciate that's quite vague at the moment, Adrian, apart from clarifying the specific actions we already have in train. But we have an open dialogue. We're talking to union staff side and colleagues regularly on it. And we're working across the system and nationally to better understand any further mitigations that we can put in place, but we'll keep the board briefed.
Thank you, Chair.
Just to follow that up, Aaron, it'll be on our risk register for these coming weeks.
It is currently, Chair, yes.
And we report it at execs every week. We have a discussion at execs. We're obviously still at ballot stage. Certainly most of us will have experienced previous strikes, junior doctor strike, etc. So we've got the ability to plan, because we know that the dates that are scheduled, it may affect us more significantly on certain days. But once we start to look at what that plan is, it looks at then what services we might ease on, as opposed to those services that we need to put all of the resource that we've got to deliver. But we've got enough expertise, I think, amongst us in the workforce team to be able to, assess the risk.
I just wanted to just check in terms of the impact on the potential impact on SOF4. Do we believe that there's a specific risk that we need to be planning for at this stage? Thank you.
I wouldn't have thought it's a specific risk to SOF4. I don't know about you, Bridget or Scott. I wouldn't have thought so. Aaron's got his hand.
I'll bring Aaron in. Aaron?
Thanks, Chair. So Bev's right, there isn't a specific cause and effect in terms of potential industrial action and the exit criteria delivery that we've been focused on for the last 12, 18 months. Lots of the risks will present themselves in a short term around access and delivery of clinical care. However, in terms of momentum and building the evidence for sustainability, things like winter pressures or industrial action place additional pressure on those teams that are overseeing and delivering the improvement work. So from that perspective, yes, it does need highlighting as a particular area of concern. I'm confident as Chief Executive that working with NHSEI and the executive team, we've got a good line of sight of continued delivery in those areas, but we will need to keep a real close eye on the delivery of those work streams, Chair, as we progress over the next 2, 3, 4 months.
Thank you. And just to, I suppose, support Adrian's point, we've got the improvement team that we work closely with as well. The goal, the objective is to get to SOF2 really. We don't want to rush out of SOF4. We want everything, all the bolts in place, everything fixed and repaired. So that's the secure platform that will then allow us to glide into becoming a good to outstanding trust. So it's not about speed, I think. It's about making sure that we're assured that everything is in place. So I think I understand what you're trying to say, Adrian. That assurance that we've got things in place around our objectives, and patient care and patient safety obviously is a priority.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, any further questions for the Chief Exec? No. Oh, Sarah.
Thank you. I think just picking up on that and thinking about the challenge around not meeting criteria to reside and the impact that's having with having patients move through the hospital and out of the hospital. I understand that potentially A&E would be protected, if you like, but actually then if we've got the challenge in other wards or other services because patients are unable to move out of the hospital or be treated, how would that be mitigated? And I think just coming back to that point, is there more we can do in the system to try to unlock this challenge around not meeting criteria to reside? Is there an update on that?
Do you mind, sir, if we come back to that when we go lower down to the agenda?
Yep.
Because I think the criteria to reside will be one of the issues. I think there will be around our performance. So we'll make a note of that. Okay. Any further points for the Chief Exec? No. Aaron, thank you. We'll move on then. Item 138, the head governor's update. Lorraine.
Nothing more to add to what's been said.
Okay, so we've got your
Anyone
written
wants to ask
report.
me anything?
Any questions for the head governor? No. Thank you. Thanks, Lorraine. We'll move on then to people, organisational development, and culture, positive difference annual report 2021-22, item 139. Bev, you're going to lead us through this?
Thank
and we've
you.
got Hannah here and Barry Rigg as well.
Yeah.
Barry, thanks for staying. Welcome, Hannah. Who else have we got? Let's see.
You have Jessica as well, Chair.
Jessica, welcome. Okay, Bev.
Okay, so I'll quickly highlight. I do appreciate there's quite a lot of information here when you start to look at the pack that goes behind this. And what I would say, first of all, as somebody quite new to the organisation, congratulations to the team. It's a great report, and what it starts to do, in my mind, is join up the thinking around both patient experience and staff experience. And it starts to also indicate how we need to correlate between gender pay gaps, etc. A few things that I've picked out on the report that might be worthy of people just recognising. One is that it covers a lot of data around training from both civility, just learning and standing up to racism. And I think we need to keep a strong focus on that. because as we get our staff survey results out in the early part of next year, we will need to want to see some improvement of that staff experience. It's really important that the inclusion networks are promoted amongst all of our new staff, and I think the staff survey will bring that evidence back again. And the other element linking to that is the recruitment panels. So the diversity of recruitment panels now should be that we ensure that we start to look and correlate some of that to some of what the gender pay gap and the ethnicity pay gap is telling us about opportunity for career development, etc. I think that the work around our carers, you know, those who work and have caring responsibilities will grow, and it's really pleasing to see that that's been included as a critical part of the work of the team. And also the work we've done around Stonewall, the veterans awareness, a huge profile of this organisation, and staff side colleagues, really important to thank them for their contribution to this, because they really are a big part of the networks that we've been promoting across the trust. Bridget and I touched briefly this morning around the patient perspective on EDS2, and I think that's coming along nicely. And when I hand over the chair of this committee, I'm sure that we can start to make some more correlation between the results that are coming through in both patient experience and staff experience. I think the only other thing I would point out would be there are indicators of a poorer staff experience for Black, Asian and ethnic minority staff, and for a similar picture for LGBT+ in terms of both career progression and bullying harassment. And I do think that we need to put the strong focus of that in our organisation as part of our staff survey action as we move forward. So I think probably one of the most comprehensive reports that I've seen, you know, in all the time I've been HR director, around joining up all of the strands of work. And I think, you know, the team ought to be really proud that they've pulled that together. Thank you, Chair.
Remember on my notes here, it's got a colleague's story will be presented.
So I think is that coming through yourself, Hannah, or?
Yeah, we'd actually prepared a presentation, but I'm not sure whether you've covered some of this. We had a short presentation to bring out some of the highlights from that report, and we do have a colleague story to share as well. Happy to guide by what we've got time for.
Time scale, Hannah. You'll be able to do it within the time scale allocated.
We'll give them 20 minutes. So
yeah.
Okay, floor's yours.
Thank you very much. So I think everyone on this call knows me, but for those who don't, I'm Hannah Chandersingh. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm Head of Inclusion and Engagement, and I'm joined by my colleagues Barry, Jessica and Fran as well to present this report. We're really thankful in a year which has been very, very pressured for all, but particularly tough for minoritised communities to have been able to make this difference that the report does show. And we would just like to highlight a few areas where we have been a part of creating some really positive outcomes. So I'm going to, if it's possible, share my screen. I don't know what's been sort of enabled and disabled.
Hannah, would you like
Can colleagues let me know if that's come through?
Yeah, we've got it, Hannah. Well done.
Thanks. I'll hand over to you, Barry, for the first part.
Thank you. So hello again, my name's Barry Rigg, Head of Patient Experience here at Morecambe Bay. The Patient Experience team are responsible for service inclusion. And what we mean by service inclusion is the inclusion of our patients, their families and carers. I'd like to start by highlighting the excellent work of our Macmillan Information Support Service. This is a non-nursing service which supports people with cancer, patients with cancer, their family and carers. So as you can see here on screen, this particular service supported 3,339 people during 2021. We are really pleased and delighted to let you know that we will be opening a new Macmillan Information Service at Furness General Hospital in early 2023. We'd also like to let you know that we've adopted the NHS E&I Core 20+5 inclusion model. And we're particularly focusing on +5 of the following areas: people diagnosed with cancer, people with a learning disability and/or autism, people who are deaf, hard of hearing, blind or visually impaired, people who identify as LGBT+, and people with a hidden disability. All of our service inclusion work is reported bi-monthly through to the patient experience group. We also talk to and feed into the colleague and patient inclusion networks. Just like to draw your attention to your reference pack on page 11 and 12, where you will see a number of our service inclusion reflections, areas of success, and our action plan there for the current year. We're particularly proud of our digital health passports, of which there are over 1,000 patients with a health passport loaded onto our electronic patient system. We're also particularly proud that some of our partners across the region are asking to adopt our passport in terms of its standard design and approach. You may recall back in July 2021, we were asked by the board to consider a register of reasonable adjustments. This is now in place and is available on our website for colleagues and system partners to access. We've talked already about EDS2 and the results, and those can be found in your reference pack on page 143. We also believe that the EDS2 results will be useful information in the development of our clinical strategy and the development of our enabling patient and carer strategy. I'd now like to hand you over to Hannah.
Thanks, Barry. Move that on. So I'd like to talk to you a little about that inclusive leadership and behaviours. So we know that we've invested a lot of time, a lot of energy into our respect and civility work over the last few years. And through some really continued and sustained efforts, as well as investment into dedicated resources, we are beginning to see some of this work make an impact. So this year, I'd like to highlight that we saw a phenomenal 27% reduction in the proportion of ethnic minority colleagues who were bullied by another member of staff. So this has come down to 29% of ethnic minority colleagues experiencing this, within 1% of the national average after a number of years of being a national outlier. And though average isn't an aspirational position, this really significant improvement to experience at work should be recognised. As you can see, the experience of white staff has also improved and now matches a national average position as well. The improvement there is even greater when we look at the proportion of ethnic minority colleagues who've been bullied by a manager. That actually reduced by 37% to a position much ahead of the national average, and for the first time equal to that of white staff at 11%. We are seeing similar figures for discrimination as well. Given that much of our feedback that we're currently working to as an organisation is around an ask for us to develop leaders and managers, I think these figures really demonstrate that the work we are undertaking has already begun to lead to quite a seismic shift in inclusive leadership behaviours. Now, I believe that the success of the last 12 months has been down to really intelligent use of data, letting us better understand the experiences of individual communities rather than BAME as a whole, but when we're looking at the anti-racist programme. And we've been able to work with and listen to colleagues in a different way to take the right actions in the right places. It's also important to let you know that though these figures look great, we know that they continue to mask a particularly poor experience for Black colleagues, particularly around behaviours and discrimination. And there is significant further work to be done, particularly within nursing and midwifery. So this year we've launched a 6-month anti-racist leadership programme within nursing, midwifery and AHP for leaders, led by national race equality expert Yvonne Coghill, CBE, who has come to help us embed and sustain the positive change that we've seen so far and go further to create what is going to be a really positive experience for all. We've also partnered with Black-led local charity Anti-Racist Cumbria to ensure that we can continue to provide support to Black colleagues and create a safe environment to speak up. I'll now pass over to Jess.
Thank you, Hannah. For those who don't know me, my name is Jessica, my pronouns are she, her, and I'm the strategic lead for inclusion and engagement. Our networks and partnerships, both internal and external, local, regional and national, are vitally important to the work that we do. They often act as a critical friend informally or through more formal mechanisms such as the Stonewall Workplace Equality Index. I want to take a couple of minutes to highlight particularly how we've used networks and partnerships over the last 12 months to understand how well we're doing in meeting the needs of our LGBTQ+ communities. We've been doing pioneering work in this space for several years, often without national or regional mandates, and this has been recognised accordingly. In the Stonewall Workplace Equality Index and the Rainbow Badge Assessment, our policies, such as the Supporting Trans and Non-Binary Colleagues policy, were highlighted as examples of best practice, and as a result, several NHS organisations have since used ours to shape their own. We were awarded silver in the Stonewall Workplace Equality Index, highlighting particularly the role of the LGBT+ network in the progress that we're making. We were awarded bronze in the Rainbow Badge Assessment, receiving one of the highest scores in the policy review section. And our workforce sexual orientation equality standard has recently been recognised nationally and awarded one of the inaugural LGBT Healthcare Advisor Awards, led by Dr. Michael Brady. Other work that's been recognised includes delivering tailored training sessions to clinical teams to ensure that we're actively supporting colleagues with advice and guidance on providing affirming and personalised care for trans and non-binary patients and service users, and our inclusion networks recognising the importance of intersectionality, such as the Women Leaders and the LGBT+ networks, ensuring that the queer experience of menopause is reflected in training materials and wellbeing sessions. Whilst all of this should absolutely be celebrated, these feedback mechanisms, including capturing the lived experiences of our colleagues, they've also highlighted areas where there's been sustained deterioration in experience, and outcome-focused actions to address these are currently being determined. So much of the work done thus far has been too reliant on individuals within networks, and at a time when workload pressure continues to be high, the full commitment and support of the board is needed to continue this work with the energy it deserves to transform our culture and enact sustainable change to tackle health inequalities faced by LGBTQ+ people, to ensure that we are a great place to work for LGBTQ+ colleagues, and bringing everybody along with us in doing so. Thank you. I'm now going to hand over to Fran.
Thanks. Hi, my name's Fran Higgins. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm the Inclusion and Engagement Advisor. So our approach to disability inclusion, in line with our inclusion strategy, has been to provide support where it's most needed, but also to ensure that managers and colleagues are given the awareness, knowledge and skills to take responsibility for disability inclusion themselves. This can be seen in how we've used our WDES Innovation Fund over the past year. With this award, we won £15,000 to support colleagues with disabilities. We already had a neurodiversity subgroup within the Disability Staff Network, which had grown from a sense that the needs of neurodiverse colleagues were not well understood and as a result were not being met. It's an area very few other employers have done much work on, so the project was both innovative and an opportunity for UHMBT to lead the way. The project allowed us to focus on three main objectives. Firstly, to provide immediate and much needed support and guidance for colleagues who were struggling at work. We set up 6 weeks of group coaching sessions for neurodiverse colleagues led by a specialist coach. The benefits from these sessions far exceeded our expectations, raising levels of self-esteem, confidence, and removing the awful isolation that many people had felt at work, in addition to the coping strategies and adjustments we hoped people would learn about. Secondly, we provided training and guidance for managers and support providers such as HR and occupational health. We introduced Neurodiversity Handbook, and we've also done a lot of work over the past year on behaviours and civility at work. Raising understanding of neurodiversity has been an essential part of addressing bullying and poor behaviour, some of which is linked to a lack of understanding about neurodiversity. Finally, the project, we looked at destigmatising neurodiversity, and participants of the project made a film which was showcased at an event for managers from across the Trust in May and is also available to be used for training and awareness raising. Our focus is now on building on what we've achieved. We have an engaged and confident group of colleagues within the neurodiversity subgroup who are keen to continue working with us. None of this would have been possible without the initial injection of £15,000, and it has allowed us to grow something with far more value than the initial input. The rest of the work we have done to support colleagues with disabilities has been achieved really effectively by developing policy and guidance, facilitating the disability network, and by general awareness raising. It was great, however, to see how much could be achieved with some additional funding. So I'll pass you back over to Hannah now.
Thank you, Fran. So I think though it's right to celebrate success where we have made a difference, we know that the work is always ongoing. Anyone who's heard from me before will know that I say we cannot become complacent if we want to continue to sustain these positive changes and actually shift the experience for those who don't yet feel we are the great place to be cared for and great place to work that we know we aspire to be. I think as we move forwards to transform the organisation in all of our areas, which we are doing in many ways, it is essential that the voice of all of our colleagues are not just heard, but really listened to, and that the actions we take are meaningful, because we know that just visible representation isn't enough. This week, an article in the national media highlighted that when minoritised people bravely stand up for change in their organisations, they're much more likely to experience a negative impact on their career as a consequence than white heterosexual men. We know that our successes this year are collective and the result of authentic allyship from leaders like you across the organisation. And this is my call to all of you at the board today. So we're often too reliant on individuals, particularly those in networks. And at a time when pressure continues to soar, we ask for your full commitment, the full support of the board and our leaders across the organisation. We ask for continued energy, persistence and resource to transform our culture and bring everyone along with us. And more than allies, we call for accomplices, those people who will take action alongside us. So if it's okay, I will share a story that we have been given by a colleague at Morecambe Bay who has ADHD, and they've asked to remain anonymous. This isn't an easy thing to write about, but I trust the person this is going to, knowing they will keep me safe in the future in my career. Many years ago, while at university, I saw an educational psychologist regarding dyslexia. He diagnosed attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or ADHD, at the same time. I denied this for many years because, as far as I knew, ADHD was just children who were naughty and ran around and were uncontrollable, other than with medication, but I wasn't like that. So I continued to ignore and mask my symptoms for the next 2 decades in my work and home life, until the mask started to crack and break as job stresses increased and I could no longer control some of the impulses and urges and gave in to the dark thoughts of inadequacy. Hyperactivity is the description of thoughts and feelings going on all the time, which disrupts sleep and makes small offhand comments become huge and entirely your fault. After joining the trust, I was bullied by a senior doctor who put me down and told me that I was stupid and not good enough. Though I'd raised this with my manager in the right way, I was moved from the area as if I'd been the person in the wrong, not the locum doctor. So my confidence fell even further. I moved around the organisation over the next few years, and I found a department where I had the support of most of the staff on the unit. I still chose not to share my diagnosis, and I went under the radar. They just thought I was good at my job, although I never felt that. When you're neurodivergent, especially with ADHD, you're constantly trying to prove yourself to be good enough, and just like everyone else who's neurotypical. ADHD feels like you're never doing what you're supposed to be doing, so no matter how productive you are, it feels like not enough. This became too much to handle, and combined with home life issues, family illness, and past patient contacts, it threw me into a deep depression and anxiety that meant I had to take time off work. Occupational health were very supportive, and they didn't want me back into the situation until I was ready. But my manager at that time didn't understand and said to me, "It's about time you stop enjoying having time off and get yourself back to work." This made me feel worse and like I was letting people down, so back to work I went. But under the surface, things were still very wrong. Every day, I planned how I could maim myself in an accident, so I didn't have to go to work in that situation, and so people could see my illness instead of the hidden disability that I had. Working with and masking neurodiversity to appear normal is exhausting, constantly fighting an internal battle to fit in and be liked by everyone around you, proving you're normal and that you can do everything. I couldn't maintain this, and 12 months later I was again signed off by my GP treating anxiety and depression illness. I was worried about going back into my role and I was ready to give up my career. However, It was at this point that I saw a job for a secondment opportunity, a slightly different career path. I went for it and I was successful. By this point, I could no longer hide my disability and I was open from the outset. This turned out to be to my benefit, as I had a new manager who was very, very supportive and thought that my neurodiversity brought more to my role and benefited others around me. Realising that they were now soon to be leaving the trust, I panicked, finally feeling like I was in a safe place. But actually, my new manager took on this support to an even higher level. They encouraged me to grow and embrace my difference. I was also supported to take part in the neurodiversity coaching this year, which was excellent and cathartic at the same time. I'm still learning about myself and how other people understand mine and other people's diversity. I've been approached by people who have never disclosed their diversity and now they feel they would like to. In this time, I actually looked at a position outside the trust and was offered it, but I was told that I needed to change, to be taught how to communicate at a high level, basically to be a different person, even though I told them from the outset about my disability. I declined that role. No one was going to change me now. It's not perfect yet. I still run into challenges, but I'll continue to challenge these people. I know I cannot please and be liked by everyone, and this is a revelation for someone with ADHD who takes all little criticism to heart. This is a positive story now, only because of the love and support I've received from colleagues and my team embracing my neurodiversity. As a trust, we still have some way to go to make adjustments, but I do think we've embarked upon that journey. Thank you, colleagues, and we'll close there.
Thanks, Hannah. I'll ask colleagues for questions. Lorraine?
It's not really a question, it's a statement. It's just that we all noticed in the last few meetings that any Asian or Black person walking into a board meeting or into a public meeting where the board are involved see a sea of white faces. And since that meeting, I've actually now started dialogue with one of our governors who is Asian, and getting very early stages, but getting into sort of the Asian culture and seeing how and why we don't get the membership and the governor applications that we could do from the Asian community. So it was just a comment to make that we have made a start.
Yeah, thank you. I think that equally matches the Council of Governor support when we seek new NEDs now. We've got current vacancies about to go out to advert, and we will be seeking candidates who can represent diverse communities. So it's just to perhaps give you a signal, Hannah, about we're absolutely as a board 100% committed, but I'll take further questions. I'll take Karen and then I'll come to you at the end, Aaron, as the Chief Exec, that's okay. So Karen, then Liz. Karen?
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for that really powerful presentation. I think it was just a fantastic example of how data and story taken together can be incredibly compelling. So thank you for that. And Hannah, you referred really strongly to really positive data-driven improvement and a data-driven focus, and how that was enabling you to develop even more targeted impact. So really, two questions that I appreciate are both really quite aspirational, but you referred to that too. One is, how can we really begin to understand how that data manifests itself at care group level, so we can really start to see what this data means in terms of how people are behaving, what they're doing, what their experience is, and how that might triangulate with some of the data that we've seen recently around engagement with the leadership development programs. How can we really make that more granular and focused, will be my first question. And the second is, what might the future opportunities be? Another aspirational plea here to really connect the data that we've seen today with the impact on outcomes and experiences for patients. How can we make that even more explicit?
Thank you so much, Karen. I think your first question around triangulation of that data at care group level, it's definitely something that we've been looking at, and we were hoping to implement that this year, but it's not transpired. I think with some of the pressures that we've had, because we need to get people really invested in owning that data. No good just have that data and then to do not enough with it. I think some of it is right to take that approach. Some of it from the data that we've seen is about looking perhaps at different slices. So the way we've approached this so far has been to look at staff groups in particular, so we can see very differential experiences based on staff group, and we're looking at how we can address it through those means. But I think certainly in the next 12 months we will be looking at how we can slice that data down by care group level, and I'd be asking colleagues at board today to really support us with making sure we get the buy-in and leadership at care group level to make these changes. The second part of your question around patient experience, it is a huge can of worms. There is so much underneath this. And I think the first part, looking at the link between behaviours and safety, I think we can already see some of that, but it's very difficult to put numbers on that. I think where we've seen particular areas that are being supported through some of our other programmes, it tends to be the same areas where we see the most inequality and the most differential experience in workforce. So the two things do go hand in hand, and I think can't necessarily be extricated from one another. But I don't think there's an easy answer to say when we've got this data sort of moves. So I think it's two things that need to be looked at side by side, if that answers your question.
Absolutely. Thank you, Hannah. And I'd absolutely support what you said there about that. It's the ownership of the data that's really important, that people see that data and recognise their own leadership, their own experience, what they're doing day to day, and that ownership really driving change. So really look forward to the continued development over the next 12 months or so, and that granular focus. Thank you, Hannah.
Thanks, Karen.
Liz?
Thanks, Mag. Thanks, Hannah, and thanks to the team and all the people that's, because it's a huge effort, isn't it, to pull a report together like this. What really interested me was the neurodiverse film that was made, and also the Stand Up to Racism coaching, that with the element of the power of the bystander, enabling colleagues to understand lots of these issues and then have the difficult conversations. And I think a lot of the changes that need to be made to society, not just within our own organisation, but society as a whole, lies with that, doesn't it, with the power of the bystander and us all understanding, and also having the confidence to have difficult conversations and confront these things. So my question is it possible to share these on a wider scale, and almost, could we look at maybe making it mandatory so it becomes part of all staff's mandatory training to watch and either watch the film or to undertake this kind of training, but then share it wider with the wider community, because if we can educate the next generation that are about to come into the workplace to understand neurodiverse colleagues and people and their needs, and also to have the confidence to have difficult conversations about racism and race, then we're going to make a huge difference, aren't we?
Thanks, Les. So the training that's been alluded to, the Stand Up to Racism training in particular, has been a pilot over the past 6 months. It is now about to be launched in Anti-Bullying Week, which is in about 2 weeks' time, to be available for all colleagues. So it is available now on TMS. We'd considered the idea of making it mandatory. It's a bit swings and roundabouts. So we know that if we do make something like that mandatory for everybody, some people will switch off more from it. And what I'd really like to do is sort of create a buzz around it, really, to get some people going through it who think, actually, that's really made me think differently, in much the same way that we have done with some of the work with the leadership programme. And we are bringing some of these elements into that leadership programme as well, which is a mandatory programme. So I think that's where I'd like to start with it. to start having some of those discussions. Your point about the community piece, I think, is really interesting, and that's why we are working so closely with some of our community partners and putting such a focus on that. People that Jess alluded to in her presentation, for example, because I think that this work doesn't just start when we get here. You know, we're working with Anti-Racist Cumbria. We're doing a lot of work in schools, in different places in the community, because I think we want to recruit the people who already have those values and those things ready-made for us, don't we? So yeah, really important points. Thanks, Liz.
Aaron, summing up point, please.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Really quickly. So I just want to put on record my personal thanks for the leadership of Jessica, of Barry, of Hannah, of Fran. There are lots of colleagues involved in lots of areas on these agendas, but it takes tenacity and integrity and leadership and momentum. And whilst it isn't the responsibility of the colleagues I've just named, they take responsibility for assisting the organisation to get to where it needs to be in the future on these agendas. I'm really grateful for their leadership. I just wanted to highlight 2 quick points. One was to Karen's point on the correlation between these kinds of improvement agendas and the impact on patients and outcomes. And whilst it is difficult to draw direct data comparators, the work of Sydney Decker with the Restorative and Just Culture, or Michael Wesh on Compassion and Kindness in Leadership, or even Chris Turner on Civility Saves Lives, the evidence of colleagues having good experience in work and not suffering from some of the detriment that not focusing on these agendas leads to, it is clear that harms can occur. So whilst we might not be able to draw direct correlation, it is critically important that that great place to work isn't reckoning. It's not a strap line. It's not a media thing to recruit people. There's a hard edge to the quality and the safety of services that come from colleagues feeling like they can have a good experience in work when they come to work. So the ask then that follows is around Hannah's call to action again around being accomplices, not just allies. This agenda came to board from a deficit-based narrative. We're not good enough, we're significant outliers, and the board needs to take account awareness and put resource and impetus to improve. What we're seeing is some year to year improvements that are very good, but have taken half a decade of momentum and focus and delivery. And for us to continue that, we need to make sure that it remains on the board agenda with the right focus and resource and accompliceness to get us over the line. So it's just an ask that I don't want board colleagues to look at, oh, the improvements are being made, we can leave that now, we can look at the next thing we need to focus on. These agendas are critical to our success in the future, so we'll make sure that it stays on the board agenda, Chair.
Without being too brutal, Hannah, I think the whole board supports what Aaron said there, you know, that we're 100% committed, but the progress isn't good enough. We're average. We want to be good to outstanding. The progress has been fantastic, but it's not good enough. We have to become a good to outstanding trust. Fantastic work today, but I think Aaron's right. If we become complacent or if we think that we've been achieved, we'll fail. It will just slip backwards. But being average is not where we want to be. Getting to average has been hard work, but the past is the past. Now move forward to become a good to outstanding trust. We're not going to keep digging up the past time and time again, but we have to move beyond average to good to outstanding, really. So I think I speak on behalf of the board to say we are 100% committed to this. We would expect to move from reassurance to assurance that our staff are having the best environment they can to do the best work that they can do for the benefit of our patients. And the data shows that, so we can triangulate it. So we're asked to note the content of the paper. I think we all do that. And we're asked to support the action plans and the national submissions. Yeah.
Chair, may I just make an inquiry? Hannah, we discussed this in one of the working groups, but it was about the value of having specific targets which we're accountable for at a board level. For example, you mentioned, Chair mentioned about the recruitment to the board of people with different characteristics, and so that we can reflect the communities that we serve. We haven't got accountable targets at a board level for that work. Do you think that would be of value?
So we have some very specific targets which are outlined in the action plans, Adrian. I think that there is work that we can do to develop some further targets, and we have a part 2 board specifically on race on the 30th of November, where perhaps we can flesh some of those out.
We could do around representation above band 8A, VSM, that sort of thing. We could do that very easily. We could certainly report on the diversity of the recruitment panels, and we can mirror what we're going to do around recruitment around the board. We can start with very simple stuff.
Taking that Lorraine's point as well, could that include
Yeah,
the couples?
absolutely. Yeah. Thank you, Chair. I know it took a bit longer, but
No, it's an important item. I think I just want to make sure that when you leave us, Hannah, Barry, Jessica, Francesca, that you leave us with the firm understanding that you've got our full support, and we will do all that we can to ensure that you can do your work.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, colleagues. Oh, Bridget.
I'm just on a final comment, Chair. Thank you. So I think it's really important in terms of the idea of having statistics or targets. That's really important. What we're looking for is parity of voice, and not. It's really important to not make this bigger. So its impact, isn't it? So people who are when we celebrate difference, representing needs to have parity of voice. That's fine. But how do we know it's made a difference?
Yes, I agree. Yeah, back to Karen's point. Thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for all that you've done. Onwards and upwards, hopefully. Thank you. Okay, colleagues. Thanks for that. It's a really important item.
apologies, I did have one.
Don't worry. Quality and safety then, delivering outstanding care and experience, item 140. The CQC and RCS, Royal College of Surgeons improvement plans. Over to our Director of Governance.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to take the paper as read to give maximum time for the board to ask me questions. But I do have several points that I need to make that are supplementary to the paper that's in the pack because of the fluidity of this particular work stream. I noted, Chair, you used the term secure platform earlier in the meeting today as the basis of what the work is that we need to do to ensure that the exiting out of SOF 4 into 3 and onto 2 is done on a very solid platform. This is part of that work. So firstly, we have suffered a dip in form, and that dip in form is on me. Okay, I take responsibility for this. What I would say is that whilst we had articulated an anxiety in August and September boards that we were a little bit slipping, what I did wrong was allow for too many recommendations to be stockpiled for delivery at the end of October. There was this vast pyramid of them. And really what I should have done was make sure that they were spread out over October, November, December, and possibly into January. We're correcting that. Now, since this paper was discussed at Quality Assurance Committee on the 17th of October, we've had a further support and review panel with the Medicine Care Group on the 24th, and we have further support and review panels lined up on the 27th with pharmacy, with governance ourselves on the 31st, and medicine on the 1st of November. The sit rep, if you like, as a supplemental to the data that's in the paper is that since Monday, we've completed a further 3. So if you go to page 55, you'll see there's colour bands across there. So completed and closed, otherwise known as blue, that's up 3. Completed and awaiting approval, that's the dark green one, that's up 2. And the behind schedule is down 5 across must do's and should do's. So if you then take all the recommendations and split them into the actions, so remember there's 119 recommendations, but there's actually within those 197 individual actions. And the data as of close of play yesterday was 34% completed, 7% awaiting approval, 31% on schedule, leaving 28% behind schedule. all of those really created by that pyramid, that pillar effect that happened in October. Onto the one last point, onto the support and review panels. I can't take the credit for this. Bridget recognised that what we needed was some impartial clinical set of eyes there rather than just wholly within the care groups that attend there. So we're very fortunate that Lynn Wire has adjusted her diary so that she can join those and offer that challenge. We are, I think, appropriately challenging at those support and review panels, in line with the trust values, but we're very, very focused on banking the evidence. I think we are slightly guilty of making things overcomplicated in our interpretation of the original recommendation. We've put some time and effort into making sure that we make things as simple as possible for people. Happy to take questions, Chair.
Thank you. Questions for Richard? I know the Quality Committee looked at this in great detail last Monday. Adrian?
Thank you, Chair. At our meeting last month, I asked the question about the potential impact, the risks that may emerge from winter pressures, and was assured that there would not be an impact. I just wondered, bearing in mind the performance that you just outlined there and the reference to actual and expected operational pressures, which were highlighted in the report, what the impact is going to be. Have the mitigation measures changed? Are we expecting any impact in terms of the outcome to the timelines and the delivery of the targets?
Okay, so I'll probably work backwards through those questions, if that's all right, Adrian. So starting with the last one, ultimately, are we going to be in a position where all the actions and all the recommendations are satisfactorily concluded before we exit out of SOF 4? Yes. Are we experiencing slippage because of some very nuanced challenges both within the operational end of the organisation and inside governance? Yes, we are. So that's on me. I should have been more challenging about setting too many of those at the end of October, and they should have been spread out across the remaining months before we got to where we need to say, are we satisfied that all of these recommendations are completed? In terms of the mitigation, I've described some of that in terms of Lynn Wire joining those panels to support us. I've described some of that in terms of the simplification of the ask. We have probably had them around on our books for too long that we've overthought what on earth the ask was in the first place. So going back to the original recommendation, reconciling that against what it said in the report and having a good look at it, there were several examples of Monday where we'd overcomplicated an ask and interpreted, please review this national document as please implement everything this national document tells you to do. We didn't need to do that. We needed to review it. We needed to evidence that we'd reviewed it, and we needed to bank the evidence that we'd done that. So that mitigation really is critical to this whole piece of work. Okay, just remind me of your first question.
I think you've covered it really in terms of the timescales, the mitigations, and not to put words into your mouth, but you're assuring me that the SOF 4 will be achieved. The exit from SOF 4.
I am assuring you that the work around the CQC recommendations will be completed ahead of the end of Q4, and that we will have banked all the necessary evidence to demonstrate that.
Thank you.
Bridget?
Thank you. So you touched on a number of points today, and rightly so, around how we effectively going to deliver a number of things in the portfolio in the timescales. So obviously what Richard's described, particularly around this, so we're coming on to the niche item next, and certainly that works in train we'll talk through. So in terms of competing priorities, what we are doing is using our staff and portfolio we have to work through. It was the right thing to call out our position in terms of a perception that we would be delayed in order to take some mitigation, which is what we've done. I think I've seen some confidence then now, and with what we've put in place, actually we will get back on track. We may well need to support, which we have done with other elements of the portfolio to get us there, which is where Lynn's helping. But I think that's around us understanding the operational pressures our role in terms of supporting, but also enabling people at the same time. So it's an art, but I am confident in terms of the position currently. We described things earlier in terms of things that we can't plan for, which is, although we will, in terms of the position on potential ballot action, but there is plans for everything. So yeah, that's helpful.
So,
I'd like to speak, but actually Karen, Hugh was up first and then Karen.
okay, Hugh, then Karen. Thanks, Ellie. You should sit here. Hugh, then Karen.
Thanks, Mike. Just following up from Richard's comments. Obviously, we looked at this in a lot of detail at the Quality Committee, and one of the things we did ask that those actions that are outstanding, and I've mentioned this in the Quality Committee report, is that there should be an assessment of the degree of impact that they may have on patient safety and any mitigating actions, because obviously you see this list of issues that are outstanding, but we just need to understand what the impact of those are, because some of the actions are potentially more important than others, if you follow me. So we just wanted that sort of assessment to be undertaken for us, so that we had some understanding of the level of risk that might be associated with any delay. And Richard assured us that by the next committee, he would have a much better understanding of the sort of delay that there may be, we may experience on some of these actions. So we did look at this in quite a lot of detail.
Thanks, Hugh. I think many of us are aware that Quality Committee in deep dive on this one with Richard. Thank you for that. Okay, Karen.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you, Richard, for that that clarity around this refreshed focus on completion of those outstanding actions. I can absolutely see the necessary focus on the rapid and robust improvement and how that is scrutinised through the support and review panels with that additional clinical oversight. I'd also really welcome assurance on how assurance of sustainability is actually built into this refreshed focus around the necessary pace. Can we be assured that that pace and that refresh will also maintain a focus on sustainability?
Thank you, Karen. Yes, I think we can, because the criteria for getting any piece of evidence through our staged process of signing them off has not been reduced or adjusted in view of the fact that we're now under a bit more pressure to come up with the goods that we should have done for the end of October. We haven't changed our checking processes to make sure that that evidence is robust. So it does go back to this sustainable, firm platform that we build all this work on, because we're determined not to just make the journey from exit out of 4 to 3 to 2, but in order to do that, we can't afford to come back to some of these problems that we've had in the past. So each one of these recommendations absolutely has to have 18-karat gold evidence to support that it can't be undone by the passage of time.
Okay.
We're not going to change our governance processes to allow that to happen.
All right, thank you. I'm going to bring Bridget in, but I'll just make a request and follow up to your question, Karen, that the Quality Committee seeks assurance that that is happening. What is the evidence? How do we triangulate the data? I'll bring in.
Thank you.
I'll bring Bridget in because I think Bridget responded to Karen's point.
I am, yeah, so it's the right question, absolutely, Karen. So the sustainability for us, so in terms of the CQC, so we should know our position, which is what you're asking. So there's a should or a must do, but actually if we were inspected again, you know, what would that look like? We should know irrelevant of it. Now there's a lot of things that have happened in the organisation around sustainability. So part of the work within Soft4, but our IPR changing our governance function is absolutely critical in terms of the board's award reporting, so we know our position. The sector that so what we can do for the quality committee, it's all mapped out in where would we see that as business as usual. So that's been the theme and the golden thread. And Chris may pick it up in terms of the RSP programme, but more broadly the intention to business as usual transfer, so we can produce something for that. The second thing, in terms of the way that the CQC will be regulated, is going to move into a slightly different way of doing that, in which case it's using intelligence in a lot more real-time position, which will be coming through as well. So with our existing systems, we will know our position, and then also with that new intelligence regime, we will change the way as a board that we view that information, which I think will help.
Okay, thank you. Sarah, are you responding to Karen's point?
I had my own points or questions, so
back to you at the end then, if that's okay. Okay, so I've got Chris, then Liz, then Sarah. Chris?
Thanks, Chairman. The specific point about SOF4 exit assurance, I'll talk about this a bit more on the RSP update, but what we will do with this information, of course, is independently test that through our gateway process that we've established with the regional team and the intensive support team. So we will ensure that that the latest position is taken through that process, and we'll bring that assurance back to the board.
Thanks, Chris, and we'll come back to it in a later agenda, as you say. Thank you for that. Liz?
Thanks, Mike. And thanks, Richard, and the team for pulling all this together. What I'm struggling with here, and I've struggled for a while, is to see how this maps from a patient experience point of view. How does all this work show a difference in the patient's experience from when we were first inspected by the CQC? Obviously, there was a huge amount of issues, and you know, I understand completely the distance we've travelled, but I'd like to see that represented more from the patient's point of view, as to how their journey is different, how they're treated on the ward, their experience, the environment they're in. So if the CQC were to go back and review and do the same inspection and visit the same areas, how would it be different now?
Very quickly, Liz, at the end of the paper, there's an appendix on page 64 that starts to try and bring out examples of the impact of delivering on those recommendations. I think I'd like to continue to do those sorts of things. So as a direct example, one of the recommendations relates to our complaints process, and we are doing a large piece of work at the moment around how we manage complaints, how patients can get engaged in complaints, how we can liaise with them about what their concerns are, and how we can get back to them with a far more nuanced and sophisticated response in a quicker length of time. So that recommendation will deliver a better complaint experience for our patients, unfortunately, when they have to complain. And we'll bring forward in that appendix examples every month of how we can see the so what, which I think is what you're describing.
It is. Thanks, Richard. And I'll make a note myself to start spending a lot of time going through that report. Thanks.
Thanks, Liz. Sarah?
Thank you. I think just a couple of things. I was at Quality Committee, so obviously part of that deep dive. I've also attended a couple of the medicine support and review panels, and they were about 6 weeks apart. And actually what was really interesting for me was the shift in focus between the first panel I attended and the one I attended on Monday this week. A couple of things that I think were significant improvements. Lynn's presence actually and input made a real difference, I think, to focus and to thinking about the wider applicability and how we could do this as simply as possible, but also ensuring we achieve what needed to be achieved. The other thing, I spoke to somebody from the medicine care group separately on Tuesday about something else and discussed with her the shift I'd seen in that ownership of actions and focus on the actions. And she actually confirmed to me that they'd had a discussion within the medicine care group about actually they needed to be really clear about what their actions were, how they were progressing them, how that was moving forward. And so when we had that meeting on Tuesday, there was complete focus on the must-dos, actually, and also on what were the key things that had taken place and the actions that had been completed. So that provided me with a lot of assurance, actually, on that journey. There's a note of caution for me, which is where we're moving into the fully completed awaiting approval. Actually, some of that data may take a little while to come through, so it's not going to be approved in the next 2 weeks necessarily. So we might see that build up, I think. I suspect that will happen. And then the final thing I wanted to talk about was that wider benefit or sustainability. We talked about a couple of things on Monday, where one was around safeguarding level 3, how clinicians might evidence that they were working on that, and that was something that perhaps can be embedded as part of the process that wouldn't just be in medicine but actually would be across the organisation. And the other was around how auditing around infection prevention control might be can be embedded as part of business as usual, and again would then be organisation wide. So that's where I was starting to take assurance, I think, from how this is moving.
Thank you. We'll take that as an assurance report, if you don't mind, Sarah, in the minutes. Thank you. Okay, just before I go to the recommendations then, Richard, thank you for your opening statement and the pyramid analogy that you gave us. This isn't a race and it isn't a win-lose. You know, we're a learning organisation. So what you've described to us is an implementation of a plan and then a learning curve that we've gone on around how that plan could be done better next time and what we've learned from it. So please, when you leave the board, take that away from you, that we are a learning organisation and we're learning how to develop and become a good trust, and where we need to go back and revisit areas, we will do. But the point that Sarah's just made is important. This is not a race. You know, if we want that, Karen was talking about that point on sustainability, to get to SOF 2, we need to have that absolute secure base to build everything on. And I'd rather we spend time on that rather than have a mad dash to that we've had a tick box exercise. That won't benefit the patients. Okay, recommendations. You read them out, I think, in your introduction, Richard. We note the 7 points there, colleagues. And there's a couple of comment points that we take on board. We accept your report, Richard.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, we'll move on then. Item 140, still with you, Richard. 140.2, the niche external investigation assurance.
Thank you, Chair. So this report was briefly referenced in the Chief Executive's report, and I'll take the paper as read. And there are a few points I just wanted to share, but less than on the previous paper. First of all, there's a graph on page 72 of the report that gives you the position statement on, I think it's about the 17th October, with regards to those 51 recommendations and where they sit in terms of niche NIAF framework. And at the time, sorry, I'll give you the scores today. So level 0, none, level 1, none, level 2, 30, and level 3, 21. And at least another 2 recommendations that, subject to a TMG meeting tomorrow, will also be level 2. So that's our sit rep of where we are with those recommendations. And we've had a significant amount of grip around reviewing the intelligence that we're gathering to check that. That's being done by somebody who's impartial to the organisation. There are execs who are knocking my door down to get involved in this and QA the evidence that sits in their portfolio before it's finally submitted to niche. That's a programme of work that starts on the 1st of November. You'll have heard the Chief Executive reference back to niche's visit, which happened last week, so starting on the 17th and going through to Friday, which was to undertake a case note review of 100 patients using the identical methodology that they used 2 to 3 years ago when they undertook the same exercise, just obviously a different set of patients. They will send us a draft report. There's a timescale in the paper that shows you when these things are going to happen. But Had they seen anything in that 100 set of notes that alarmed them significantly, I don't think they would have waited until the production of that report before they told us something. So there are no red flags. There are areas of improvement. There always are with case note reviews, but there are no red flags identified through that process that Niche undertook last week. And I think and we'll see the paper come through to tell us that in time. I'm happy to take any questions.
Just before you take questions, Richard, anything you've got to say about the title of the paper is about any cross-cutting themes? So are there any cross-cutting themes coming out from the Niche report? There's nothing in the Niche report and the fact they've been here last week that would impact on any other areas within the trust. No. Thank you. So, colleagues, the paper is an update on the current position. We're asked to review and challenge the contents of the paper and seek assurance against the trust preparation for phase 5. Well, phase 5's already started. Yep. You've updated us about that. And progress against the recommendations. You've updated us on the current position on that. Happy to accept the paper, colleagues. You know it's live at the moment, so thank you. Okay. Yeah. Paper 141 then. Thanks, Richard. Maternity safety update. Chief Nursing Officer and Director of Midwifery.
Thank you. So I'm hoping the Director of Midwifery, Heather, is on to present.
She's there.
Excellent.
Hi, Heather.
Hi, Heather.
Hi. Thank you. I'll take the paper as read. There's just some key highlight points I would like to make the board aware of. So as per perinatal surveillance model in the appendix, there's just some highlighted points that I want to go through in terms of the MDT training compliance, because we've discussed this at board for quite a few months in a row. So just to update, obviously our improvement journey is fluid, therefore there's been some changes since the paper was first written. So we've still got projected compliance for anaesthetists to be under 90% by December, and that's obviously a CNST compliance deadline rather than a safety issue. Just to assure the board that we've put on some additional virtual sessions to try and increase the compliance for the professional groups that are actually struggling to attend, so they will still fit the criteria for CNST in terms of being multidisciplinary, but we will do them virtually to see if we can actually get the compliance level to where it needs to be by December. CNST Year 1 evidence has been resubmitted as requested by NHS Resolution. We are waiting for their judgment on whether the CNST discount we received for Year 1 is safe or whether it needs to be refunded. CNST Year 4 deadlines have been refreshed, they've been published, and unfortunately, it makes the training compliance more difficult to actually achieve. So the original ask was to look over training compliance over 18 months. They have now shrunk that back to 12 months. So it does put us under more pressure to meet the compliance deadlines by December. Hence why we've put the virtual sessions on. We have seen midwifery fill rates to continue under 80%. We have got new starters who have started this month, the students who have qualified, but unfortunately we are experiencing delays with the international recruitment programme. Unfortunately, that's not unusual. That's been experienced up and down the country. It often takes longer to get people into post than first expected. So we're expecting our half of our international recruits not to come until early 2023 now. So we will look at what mitigations we can put in place for that staffing deficits. We obviously reported a reduced uptake for banking agency shifts, with midwives reporting going and joining agencies for enhanced rates of pay. We are working with the wider team to look at our enhanced payments for bank, and hopefully that paper will be due for approval soon. The RCOG has issued guidance on short-term locums in maternity services. The CD and the Associate Director of Ops will work through that document and will bring an implementation plan for early next year as required. We have just developed our first maternity digital strategy in alignment with the Trust digital strategy, and this has been signed off by the LMS. This was required for CNST. Our progress against the maternity support programme exit criteria shows sustained improvements for September. And you will note in the appendix there's also the new maternity dashboard with SPC charts for the board's information. The clinical strategy development for maternity is ongoing, and we have a new community pharmacy-led vaccination service for flu and pertussis and COVID-19, which is a good innovation. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Heather. Colleagues, looking around the room. Oh, Karen was our maternity champion. Oh, you've got your hand up. Anything you want to ask?
I have, yes, thank you. Thank you, Heather, for the update around actions to really address the training compliance levels for anaesthetists. I know that was something we discussed at the last Maternity Safety Champions meeting and also at Quality Committee, and it's great that those virtual sessions are now in place. I was just really looking for assurance that we can actually track that people have engaged with those virtual training opportunities. So it's one thing to have the opportunity, which is fabulous, but how are we going to be effectively able to evidence that engagement against the meeting those compliance rates?
Yeah. So the practice development team will monitor that we monitor in terms of as soon as the sessions are booked, how many we expect to be booked in a week. If they're not booked, we liaise with the anaesthetic department trying to get people on, and we monitor it literally every time there's a session. So hopefully we can be quite responsive. I think the difficulty is with the Year 4 standards being refreshed, that's made that even more difficult. But obviously we've articulated before, it's not just about CNST, it's about the safety of the service as well. So just to reassure the board, we do track that as much as possible.
Thank you, Heather.
Liz, then Aaron. Liz.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Heather. Just want to talk a little bit more about the staffing and the point 6, where you mentioned about midwifery, midwives taking up joining agencies because the rates are higher, which I completely and utterly understand, especially given the situation we all find ourselves in at the moment. You know, it's natural to do that, to look for where the higher pay is going to be. But I just wondered what support you're getting from the ICB in as you know, across the whole region, if we can sort of tackle this together so that we can, you know, as one body, you've got a better chance of taking on the agencies, because what they'll start to do is if they sniff an opportunity, they'll start raising the rates, you know, ginormously, and particularly as we go into winter. So if we act as one across the ICS, or even across, you know, the Northwest region, we've got a better chance of taking on the agencies, and perhaps getting to a position where everyone can afford the rates.
Yeah. So I think in-house we're looking at our incentives around our local bank. There's definitely work going on in the region in terms of agency and you know, the amount they're allowed to charge and stuff. So we do look at that and discuss that as a regular sort of agenda item at the LMS board. So there is system working. I just think we're particularly challenged in our organisation for maternity services because we have one site that uses a lot of agency and another site that doesn't, and it uses a lot of bank. So it's different sort of issues depending on which site you're in. But certainly there's system-wide working to make sure we try and control that as much as we possibly can, but also while we support our midwives as well.
Thanks, Liz. Aaron?
Yeah, thanks. And thanks, Heather. So I did have one point which is very similar to Liz's, which is if we're starting to talk about differential pay or incentive pay locally, we need to do that within the provider collaborative board arrangements, because you know, it does have a knock-on effect for other units, and if we need to make a special case for what happens here, then we need to do that through that structure. So that's important. The overseas, I mean, it's disappointing around the delays for getting colleagues, because actually I'm not going to put a figure on it, but I'd say a good amount of the work we're doing is reliant. The workforce is like the critical success factor. So are those delays anything that sit within UHMBT to resolve? And if so, can we do anything about that? And if they're not, same question, is there anything, any support that you need or anything we can escalate or deal with that might get those colleagues with us sooner?
I don't think so, Aaron. I think that it's about availability of OSCEs, etc. It's about they have a high drop-off rate. You know, about 25% of those who plan to come drop out. So it fluctuates all the time. So I think I've pretty much seen it in most organisations where the international recruitment's been delayed. But I will pick it up with the teams and see if there's anything we can do to expedite that.
Great, particularly that 25% drop off. If there is a way of getting any intelligence as to what that might be driven by and what we might do about that locally, even I'm happy to support where I can, Heather. So if there's anything that myself or Bridget or Bev can do on that particular agenda, then let us know.
Bridget?
So you'll know we've got in the North West a really established international pipeline, but however the nursing midwifery one is new in recent times, so we're working heavily with the North West Leeds on that. What I would say is they prioritise Morecambe Bay compared to others, which is why we've got these 10 international colleagues joining us. So whilst there are some delays, that they're really clear in terms of the requirements of Morecambe Bay, so that's really helpful. So we'll continue just to work with them really closely. In terms of OSCEs for both nursing and midwifery, there are some delays, and that's due to volume and other things. But actually, again, I know I've spoken to the national team and regional; they are doing everything they can. So it's not comforting for right now. However, the fact that Morecambe Bay has been prioritised is helpful.
Just two from me, Heather. Really, it is a continuous theme, like say the agency and bank reliance that we use. How can we be assured as a board that this must be having an impact on care? It must be having an impact on the quality of experience of mothers-to-be and parents. How can we be assured that the quality of care is of a high enough quality?
So I think to reassure the board, the site that uses the most agency use is Barrow. A lot of them are long-term agency midwives. So if I say some of them have been on our books for 10 years. So we're not using a lot of agency that are not used to our organisation. So they're essentially, if you like, permanent agency staff. Now there's something about the sustainability from that from a finance perspective, but from a quality perspective, they've worked with us for a long, long time. So it's not so much an issue at Furness for that reason. And Lancaster is predominantly our own staff doing bank shifts, just to reassure you.
Thank you. Hopefully the international situation will sort itself out. It's been part of our monthly report now, must be about 2 years. So we look forward to some sort of resolution on this fairly rapidly. Okay, we're asked to note your report. Aaron, you've got your hand up just before I move on.
I have, sorry, Mike, and thank you. It was just a very brief note, just referencing the dashboards and the SPT charts, the IPR methodology, and just to report, it was really positive, particularly to hear our quality and safety midwife using that as the basis for her reporting into safety champions and into quality committee, and really using that methodology to inform deep dives, extended work and assurance. So I just wanted to note that for the board. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we note the report. Okay, we'll move on. Stay with us, Heather, because we're now moving on to 1412, the avoiding term admissions into neonatal units, called the ATTAIN report. Can you give us an update, please?
Thank you. So this is our progress report against CNST Safety Action 3, and this is for CNST Year 4. So the ATTAIN programme is avoiding term admissions. So essentially it's a quality improvement initiative that's been around for a few years around trying to ensure that we reduce the number of potential separations of mum and baby shortly after delivery. So it's about using the learning themes that come out of the ATTAIN reviews that we hold weekly, and putting that into learning and improvements into practice. So this paper details the ongoing work around the ATTAIN, the fact that we've recommenced our MDT meetings, and that they're truly MDT focused. So they've got obstetrician, paediatrician, neonatal nurse. It's very much a neonatal collaborative working.
Oi.
I think somebody's got the microphone on with a dog in the room. I think whoever is that, if you could switch your microphone off, please.
It's you, because otherwise you shouted oi to someone totally different.
I assume the oi that came over the speakers was to the dog and not to the board. Right. Move on, Heather.
Thank you. So the paper includes an action plan in Appendix 1, which gives our update against the learning that we've identified and the improvements we need to put into place. Obviously, following review of any trends that are identified during that week. So the quarter that we do. So we do the reviews weekly. We're currently doing a thematic review into babies readmitted with jaundice, because we've seen that a couple of times, and you'll see there's some quality improvement around trying to undertake some screening to ensure that that doesn't happen. And we've got some changes in practice around, we've been undertaking blood glucose monitoring on babies that don't actually need it in alignment with best practice. So obviously that will reduce the amount of invasive testing. So as a general rule, the Trust has had for a couple of years a term admission rate below the quality improvement standard for the country, which is 6%. But in the last year, we've just seen Furness General's term admission rate just creep up to the national standard. So it's just something that the ATTAIN group will monitor weekly, just to see if there's any variations in practice or any themes, or whether it's just a spontaneous increase in the number of babies that needed to go to special care. And the action plan from this is actually will be reviewed at board level safety champions, but it's also reviewed by the LMS as well in terms of part of their quality surveillance. So it's just to ask the board to approve the paper as part of CNST evidence, please.
Okay. Karen? Oh, sorry, I thought your hand up was up. Is that a legacy hand?
She's on mute, I think.
Yeah, well, I read that. It was a legacy hand. Thank you.
It was a legacy hand, yes.
Right, yeah.
Apologies.
Okay, thank you. Sarah?
Thank you. Thanks, Heather. I just had one question, actually, so thank you for the report. Obviously noting that increase in term admissions at FGH and that you're going to be doing a review around that. When can we expect to see the themes coming through from that, to understand, as you say, whether it's just not just a blip, but whether it's sort of the babies did need to be readmitted, or if there are any things we need to learn from that? Yeah, so part of the ATTAIN review, it's done weekly. It's done weekly, and bearing in mind the birth rate we have at Furness, you won't get themes very quickly because they don't happen that often. So that's why we do a paper every quarter to review the themes. But obviously our quality improvement action is in real time. So if we review and in
3 weeks, say we've got a theme, then we'll be straight on that theme doing some quality improvement and some learning straight back to the shop floor. So just because of the pure numbers, it makes it difficult to identify the themes as quickly as people might expect.
And just to follow that up then, looking at last year where you saw that increase in admissions, is that something, have you already done that review of last year so to understand what is driving that, or is that something that you're going to be doing? I was just trying to understand that.
Yeah, so it's obviously the quality standard for the country is 6% and we're at 6%, so it's not above, we're not an outlier, it's just for us we've seen a slight increase. So sometimes particularly that review, we obviously identified about the jaundice and the blood glucose, which we've identified, but some of it's really quite difficult to say, to be honest, because there will be some impact in terms of COVID. So it's just something that we will monitor in alignment with national reports as well, to see if there was a spike nationally with term admissions, which, yeah, it's just continuous monitoring really, to be honest.
Thanks, Sarah. Hugh?
Yeah, I just want to go in, Mike, if this item's finished, because I did have a question about the dashboard, and that's why my mic was still on, and you heard my dogs going bonkers in the background. So, so I only want to come if the discussion on this part has been finished.
Okay, I think the discussion has finished on this part.
Yeah, it was just about the dashboard, Heather. As I read it, I thought there were lots of total numbers when actually percentages might be more helpful, because it's quite often quite difficult to work out what the total numbers mean, rather than them being a percentage of the. If you go through, I don't want to go through them all, but I could.
Can I interrupt you if you don't mind? Can I suggest that you and Bridget?
I was going to suggest that, but there's one quite important point that I wanted to make, was that on the birth location one on page 95, it says that higher is better for all of them. So numbers born in the CLU labour ward, numbers born in a freestanding MLU, and number of home births. And obviously it can't be possible that higher is better for all of those. So either it's a non-judgmental statement, it's just a statement, rather than higher is better than all of them. So, but with regards to my other comments, I will perhaps have a chat with Heather and Bridget about how we can make this more meaningful, in the same way that I worked with Leanne on the main dashboard.
Thank you. Okay. We'll come back as well on that point about making statements like that, as you related to on page 93 as well. That can be discussed outside the meeting if colleagues are okay with that.
95, Mark.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thanks, Hugh. You're asking us, Heather, slightly different from the board recommendation. We're asked to receive your report and recommend it so that it goes into the further assurance processes within the maternity overview. Is that right?
Yeah, it's just to note it will be used as CNST evidence. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. The minutes will reflect that, colleagues. Thank you. Stay with us. We'll have one more item and then I'll stop and have a break. Safety Champions report. Again, Bridget and yourself, Heather.
Thank you. So this is the Maternity Safety Champions report. So this details all the activities undertaken by the Maternity and Neonatal Safety Champions, which is required for CNST Safety Action 9. So the paper just talks about the membership and who is the Maternity and Neonatal Safety Champions. Obviously, Karen's joined us as the NED Safety Champion. It details that we've had new terms of reference. It talks about what activities we're undertaking. So Karen's kindly attended some MatNeo SIP events and some wider quality improvement educational sessions, which has been really nice to see Ned get involved in that. And so purposefully, the papers predominantly to talk about what activities have been done and use them as evidence for Safety Action 9 as well, but also keep the board informed in terms of what activities are actually undertaken on a monthly basis. And there's some recommendations within the report about relaunching our walkarounds and the type of communications that safety champions are involved in. And I think we can say Karen's been a definite refreshed safety champion who's been incredibly supportive and very, very active, which is wonderful to see, because I think, noting particularly the East Kent report, which will be put on the agenda for public board next month, we're going to probably be, as Aaron said, getting our money out of Karen as the board level safety champion. Ned.
This paper's come to the board, Heather, for assurance purposes. So you've given us an update there, which is reassurance. So I'm going to ask Karen at this point to come in and just ask how we triangulated the information in the paper and what are the assurance issues for the board.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Mike. So I'm delighted to join this team, that the maternity safety champion team, and also that reflects that maternity safety champion team across the trust. We now have a full complement, and everybody participates in the appropriate meetings. I think the key for us here is really through to triangulation, and particularly being able to even more effectively represent the experiences and outcomes for women. And so a key next step, as reflected in the paper, is to further strengthen the collaboration between the NED maternity safety champion and the maternity voices partnerships, and that's a next step. We now have those meetings scheduled, and a meeting with the chair of the MVP to be confirmed, but happening in the next couple of weeks, and that really enables us to bring that effective triangulation and really enhances that board to ward or board to women's experiences and outcomes line of sight. And that's what we want increasingly to bring through to the board.
Okay, thanks, Karen. And we'll keep looking for that triangulation as evidence, data, etc. Thank you for that. I'll just check with Hugh whether that's a legacy hand or whether he's got his hand up on this item. Hugh?
Legacy.
Thank you. Okay, we have the recommendations, and we've got the beginning of assurances there from Karen. We're happy to accept the paper and the report. Heather, as always, thank you. Bridget, as always, thank you. We shall see you again next month. I think you're fully aware that maternity is one of our priority focuses for the trust. So thank you. Please thank all your colleagues. Thank you for your papers this morning.
Thank you.
Those items then, colleagues. It's 20 to 12. I'm going to have a 10-minute break. We'll reconvene at 10 to 12, and then we'll go through the recovery support and performance, and then the assurance committee reports. Okay, colleagues, see you back here at 10 to 12.